Hi, everyone, and welcome to AB Conversations, where we will help you CFP your way out of it. A podcast where you get into the minds of a couple certified financial planners on how we think and feel about everyday financial planning questions and what should really matter most to you. A healthier financial life starts now.
Red leather, yellow leather. How now, Brown County? How now, Brown County? Unique New York. Unique New York.
Is that from, that feels like something from Anchorman.
It certainly is. Thanks for catching on.
All right. Welcome to another episode of the AB Conversations. CFP your way out of it.
Yeah, lay it on me. What are we talking about today?
All right. So today's topic comes from a listener, in quotes. Now, it came from a client. There was an article that was making the rounds online this week or last week, and it raised a great question and one that I think applies to our audience. And that article was speaking about the 4% withdrawal rule and how it, in today's world, it may not be applicable anymore.
Yeah, so let's just throw this one in the camp of in the craziness of 2020. We get to question a lot of things in a world of change, right? So let's put this one there. I would start, I guess, we should probably start by explaining the 4% rule, right? To us as financial planners, this is pretty much like the basis of certain retirement planning. And while we don't like certain rules of thumb, the idea here is this comes up when we have to answer the question, like, how much money do I need to have saved in order to retire, right? The idea just being, if I'm now not earning paychecks and I have to replace that income, I know that fixed income may be a part of that, right? Social Security, maybe a pension, but I'm probably gonna have to rely on some of my savings. So how much savings do I need to make sure I'm not gonna run out of money over a long period of time? So, that's where mathematics and the history of the markets has kind of said, well, a safe withdrawal rate is probably around 4%.
Yeah, so I think that 4% number was kind of thrown out there as I think it's multi-pronged, right? It's based off of life expectancy, right? If someone's going to live in retirement between 20 and 30 years, 25 years, if you took 4% for the next 25 years, now that draws down your, 100% of your assets to zero if that's a straight line. And then part of it was also just based off of rates of return or interest rates historically. So using the 10-year treasury as kind of the baseline of a risk-free rate of return, historically, that's between 4 and 6%. That's clearly not the case anymore, which is why I think that article was kind of written. With the 10-year treasury at 0.6%, does it still make sense to be able to live off of 4% of your portfolio?
Yeah, and I think we often kind of like try to dumb that down, right? All these numbers. We look at somebody's life savings, we kind of say like that's the geese that are laying, your golden eggs in retirement. And if each geese can give you 4 eggs, you should be fine. But what if they're not producing that amount of egg? At some point you have to start eating geese. And, when you do that, it might be a pretty good meal, but you're not going to get any of the future eggs that may have been produced. So it is a sensitive thing. I guess, my question then comes back to how would we respond to this? How you get to 4% is maybe the question then, right? It may mean that people need to take more risk, and maybe that's not a palatable thing, right? Because that would make people feel uncomfortable in a phase of life where like they would say, hey, I can't really stand to see my portfolio go down. But I look at this as kind of resetting expectations. So, how would you respond then to the idea that if 4% is still kind of like what we have to target being able to take, and the safest way to do that's only going to give us, as you said, 0.6 or 0.7, 30-year treasuries at 1.5, whatever it is, what do we do as financial planners to help people with this?
Yeah, so where my mind went before jumping into that was just in terms of the whole geese laying your golden egg kind of theory. That 4% being they call it the safe withdrawal rate. Again, the idea being as long as you can generate around that level or maybe even slightly higher, that you theoretically then should never run out of your principal. so that it should last your lifetime and, again, potentially beyond.
Yeah.
That's certainly the safest way to go about that, but that's not always going to be the case, right? There could be a time where you will start to eat into your principal, you will start to eat some of those geese. And as long as that's later in life, again, that will probably be an okay thing. So it's not necessarily that 4%, you can't deviate from that. You have to do that, or your retirement is doomed. That's certainly not the case.
And I think we sometimes have to bring the personal aspect to the relationship that we provide to kind of understand that, right? We would define as worst case scenario for somebody, you kind of had a picture perfect retirement if you bounced your last check on the day that you pass away, right? You were able to really enjoy that money. You didn't run out early. You bounce the last check. For some people, having something left behind is clearly part of the goal, if it's some sort of legacy, children, grandchildren. But that's where that personal side of it needs to come in, to be able to say, I think going back to your modeling here, maybe the last years of your life, you're taking 5, 6, 7%. And that's not a big deal if the life expectancy is starting to dwindle. It's just, we want to be sensitive on the front end to when you first retire, right? Longevity in retirement means you really don't want to be killing geese too early in the process.
Yeah, I guess that's a great clarification, that it is the onset of retirement, or early on. That's where theoretically or hopefully you have the next 20 to 30 years in front of you, and that inflation, even though right now inflation really isn't a big deal, but historically inflation averages between 2 and 3%. That you throw 20 years of inflation, those expense numbers start to grow pretty quickly. And again, it's that later in life, the unknown, that those expenses in today's dollars extrapolated out at 2% for the next 20 years. If you're spending $100,000 now, it grows very quickly.
Yeah, and especially against your other income streams, right? Most people that have a pension don't have a cost of living adjustment to it, and those that rely on Social Security to a certain extent, when's the last time you got a reasonable increase relative to what you really felt as far as your expenses? I mean, I know it was 2.8% not too long ago, but right, it hasn't been there, right? The averages over the last, whatever it is, 10, 15 years, we project Social Security at 1.5%. So it does mean that you have to rely on those geese maybe later in life. But then, I mean, let me take this back to the question. I think we gave some good commentary there. Like, so what is the fix then, right? If we know that certain risk assets come then with risk, and certain risk-free interest is not at 4 or 5%, what's the answer?
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on it earlier. It's just resetting the expectations on what it's going to take to meet the return needs. There's certainly, when we say risk, that I think people's minds immediately go to stock market risk. And that's clearly what most people see and feel on a daily basis when they're, watching the news and they see if the Dow or the S&P 500 goes up or down. So that's certainly one component that we like to say, that even our most conservative investors still own some level of stocks in their portfolio, because historically, those are the assets that do keep up with inflation, because over long periods of time, the stock market has always trended higher. Again, the disclosure here of past results do not indicate future performance, or whatever the formal disclosure is.
Yeah, and that's where my mind went too. Not only when we proposed this as a question that we were going to answer today, but as you were talking about it, when I say kind of resetting expectations, part of the default, I think, of getting to retirement is kind of, again, I got to get more conservative. I now need to live on this pool of money for the rest of my life. But are you going to spend your whole savings on day one of retirement? It's a loaded question. Of course not.
Yeah.
So we often talk about, you have to be able to bucket your money, right? And maybe we'll go through this in another minute. You have to be able to bucket your money in a way that gives yourself permission to take some risk, acknowledging that it's not money you're going to be touching in the first years of retirement, right? That you probably just proved to yourself this year And if not this year, let's go back to some volatility in 2018, right? The last couple times that we've seen big moves in the market, you survived it. And if you kind of stuck with your plan, guess what? You're back to, kind of feeling okay. The 50-50 equity to bond portfolio over the last 15 years is still averaging more than 6%, right? So it's almost resetting the expectations that you have to be able to give yourself permission to be uncomfortable with a certain, right, percentage of the money in a long-term bucket, knowing you're not going to touch it in the next couple of years. That we call that our 3-bucket theory. I think that's the point on why this 4% rule is not dead. It's just how you go about feeling okay about it may need to be restructured.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, that how you get to that end result to be able to safely take 4% does require a little bit more of a realization that doing that in a risk-free manner is probably not possible. And if it is, you're probably locking yourself into something that's contractual and does not have the flexibility, and you're going down another path that is complicated as well. There's no risk-free way right now to get 4% that I know of.
Yeah, and I think that's where, we're not going to say we get creative with the way that we go about this, because I think, anybody that knows us or wants to do a little research on us, like, we're very fundamental in the way that we go about it. But it is maybe changing the way we converse about it too, to say, what is the degree of risk that we're willing to take, and recognize that equities can produce income, right? And it's just that whole idea, if you're not going to sell an equity when it's down, right? We don't want anybody to do that. The fact that the value went down may not change the fact that it's paying you a 2% dividend or 3% and contributing to the income stream that you need. So I think it really comes back to not only resetting the expectations with our clients, with the people that entrust us to work this out for them, but resetting the expectations, I would say, into how they're going to go about recreating that income stream.
Yeah. So I'll just real quick, because I had a thought there, and then I'll kick it back to you to kind of explain the 3-bucket theory. But I think, so not only is it having the conversation and somewhat resetting those expectations, but then it's when a March 2020 happens and the market is going sideways and it feels like the sky is falling. It's
right.
Our role then is, again, to hold people's hands through that process, again, to reiterate where we were in a much calmer time, just to be able to weather those storms when they do come, because we know they will. Like, these things historically happen, not infrequently, but again, we've said this multiple times on multiple podcasts. You stick to the plan, and oftentimes over time, you will be rewarded for some discipline.
Yeah, and I think, to speak directly to the 3-bucket theory, it's to help people do that. It's to give themselves the permission to hang in there, right? The 3-bucket theory starts with just holding cash, right? I know it's not the fancy financial advisor thing to say, but going back to kind of recreating an income stream, if you need $100,000 and your pension and Social Security are going to make up 50,000, I'm just making up numbers now, then you need 50,000 coming from your savings. Well, we would say that you should have at least a year, maybe even 2 years of whatever your investments are in a risk-free asset then, right? Because historically, most market downturns last anywhere from 9 to 18 months, right? This last one lasted like 45 days, 30 days, whatever it was.
Yeah.
They're happening quicker. I think we've noticed that. But if you have what you need to spend in the bank in a safe spot, then again, I hope you give yourself a little bit of permission to go, I don't need to liquidate to meet my needs, so I can hang in there. Mm-hmm. That second bucket is just going to be, kind of what we kicked this off with. Your fixed income streams that may come from U.S. Treasuries or corporate bonds, or fixed income that's paying you something, right? But if you have, we would say, anywhere from 3 to 7 years of that income need in that bucket that's producing income for you, again, think in the total here. You don't have an equity that you need to touch. You don't have a risk asset that you need to touch for a long time. So whether it's 18 months of a downturn, the next recession, who knows? I think, the bucketing idea is that when you see your values changing, If the value in decline is really the equities, okay, I didn't need to touch that for 7 more years anyway. I can wait till it rebounds, and when I do have the gains, I'll pass them forward. That's the theory, and I think, again, if on the whole, those 3 buckets can still get you to 4% rather consistently, then the theory is not dead.
I agree.
All right. So
now,
anything else?
Now what?
Yeah. Let's maybe wrap that up and tie those 3 things together. The 4% rule, we like to think of that as, the geese that can lay golden eggs. You certainly don't want to kill geese too early. The second thing I'd say that we kind of hit on, when you put these things in the lens of time horizon, I think you're giving yourself some permission to, seek longer, returns over a longer period of time by taking a little bit of reasonable risk. And we would say that risk is quantifiable. Yeah. But then I liked your third point here. You should probably have an accountability partner, right? It's our job to help recreate that paycheck, not have you overspend, but in the same way, develop the portfolio that kind of supports that 4% withdrawal rule, but also can reevaluate that maybe in the later years of life. So I guess there's the plug for having somebody like us, on your team to go through this. So give us a call. We're here.
Absolutely.
Thanks, bud.
All right.
Until next time.
You got it.
Hey everyone, Adam and I really appreciate you tuning in. Please note that the opinions we voiced in the show are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be most appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, your accountant, and financial advisor or tax advisor prior to making any decisions or investing. Thanks for listening.